What does discovering your true self actually even really mean? I mean, I know I do a lot of purpose work. I help people along those lines, but I think some people feel like they ain't never discovered themselves. Right? So rediscover
Mhm.
might be even a harder task. So take us into it a little bit.
I think for me and my journey is I forgot who I was. And I find a lot of people, the clients I talk to, and even just individuals I have conversation with, we start living by rules. We start living by other people's expectations, societal, cultural expectations, all these things that come in that from the outside that start telling us and dictating us who we should be, how we're supposed to show up, how we're supposed to act, what we're supposed to say and not say, that has been this agreed upon compact. The sons of Don Miguel Ruiz, who wrote the Four Agreements, and then his one son wrote the fifth, when they write about this and talk about Toltec wisdom, they use the word domestication. It hits me more in that way of we become domesticated to a set of rules that we stop questioning. And when that shell gets put on us, we forget who we are living from the inside out.
Yeah.
And suddenly the shell becomes us. And another way to talk about it is the ego self, the learned self versus the authentic self. And the authentic self is the one that feels frustrated and bound and constricted by the rules and says there's something more here. But the ego self gets really loud because that's one we experience in life 99% of the time.
We absolutely do. Even myself, and I'm like, am I showing up? Or is this a representative of me showing up in this moment? But I think you also have to be self-aware in order to do that and ask yourself those questions. And so what inspired you to start along this journey? Because of course, you're a coach, you're an amazing coach, but so many of us, we have so many different array of things that we focus on.
So going way, way back, there's always been a part of me that was the part that heard and saw those things. When I was 4 or 5 years old, I would hear people calling my name who weren't there. I grew up in I swear that house was haunted. And that was part of the conversation I had with that coach a couple years ago about magic. So I've always had this gift that came and went, but I moved into really design initially. So my work was about visual problem solving. And about 12 years ago at this point, I had done all the things that society and family said I should do to be happy. I was married, had the house, had the 2 dogs, everything by the rules, had the title, had the job, all of it. And I was freaking miserable.
Wow.
And I sat back and looked like, what's going on? I could feel something inside of me saying, life can be better. Life should be better. But if you asked me what better meant, I couldn't tell you in that moment. I just knew there was this discord, this lack of harmony inside of me. And I hit a wall that resulted in me leaving that company abruptly. And through all of that existential crisis of asking myself, who am I and why is my life like this? I had gotten connected to a hypnotherapist and we did some work to help me get my mojo back, like refine my confidence after all this external stuff had knocked me down. And I think that's what drew me into it initially. And then by being able to tune back into some universal signals and paying attention to signs from the universe, I had to reinvent myself. At that point, I'm going through a reinvention of like, what do I do? I said, I'm kind of thinking hypnotherapy. She said, see what's out there. We were moving to Naples, which is a relatively tiny town, looking online for training. There's at the time one school in Florida teaching a state certified program. That's what opened it all up, is tuning back into those signals that were always there.
How do you actually balance your true self, but also still continue your drive and being able to take action in your life?
Yeah, so this becomes an interesting part of the conversation because when we start talking about the ego self and the true self, we start treating them like 2 different people, and they're not. They are the same. It's a matter of which one's driving the car and which one's riding shotgun. And what tends to happen in life is rather than the true self and the deeper desire being the one in the driver's seat and the ego riding along, the ego jumps over and says, we're going this way because this is what we've been told to do. As the shift takes place in the energy, it's important to recognize they are not 2 separate aspects of us, but allowing the authentic self to come forward and work with the ego self, because the ego self is the one that's here in 3-dimensional reality, interacting with the world, interacting with others, is the goal-driven, who sets the markers, where the authentic self is the one that has the passion and the drive. And when they come together and work together, and the ego might be more of a navigator calling out potholes and calling out possible turns, that's when we can get both energies in alignment. When the 2 two come together and integrate, it's also very similar to when we integrate our shadow, even though the ego is not shadow, that we tend to have this side of ourselves that we disavow, like when we blow up or whatever, like that's not me. But in the work of Debbie Ford, if we're disavowing that powerful side of ourselves, we are not experiencing ourselves as a whole person. When we integrate the shadow and really embrace its power and listen to its perspective, now again, all limits are off because we're becoming whole in how we present ourselves. So it's a both and of letting the two sit together. Each has a power the other doesn't have. And when they combine that, now it's just so much more.